Good morning. My name is Dr. Bill, and this is the first in a series of tutorials on how to be more effective in high school, college, and your career. And this material, today we will talk about how to effectively read a textbook. But this material comes from a brand new book that I have just come out with and called Confessions of a College Professor: What We Never Taught You in High School, College, and Career. So today, and let me tell you just a little bit about this book. It's 10 chapters long, about 280 pages, 100,000 words. It literally is filled with hundreds of suggestions on how to be more effective in high school, college, and career. How to work smart and not hard. How to interview and find your career. How to thrive in school and in life. My background, I was a college professor in business for over 30 years at a major university in Oregon. I've written 7 books on computer science and information technologies. I've had probably over 10,000 students in my classes. I've been a business consultant, a world traveler, visited 50 countries and 49 states, husband, father, and grandfather of 9. Now this new book is available in a Kindle version on Amazon. And if you would like a copy, simply search Confessions of a College Professor. I think you'll be 100% satisfied with this book. It is filled with numerous ways to be more effective. I'd like to start first, though, with a little humor. I think that helps the understanding and makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. One of my favorite quotes is from a past Harvard professor, and his comment is, if you think education is expensive, you ought to try ignorance. It is much more expensive. Here's another one. At the end of every course, typically a professor will ask the students to rate the course. And this is one student evaluation that actually occurred on a course assessment. It says, in the space below, please write any overall comments you feel are appropriate for the class. And one student wrote, if I had 1 hour to live, I'd spend it in this class because it feels like an eternity. Very appropriately put. Here's a good one for a high school or college freshman. It's the freshman on their first day of school, and it shows a person in a shark tank with all the sharks moving around. And it's just kind of how the individual feels on their first day of school with all the pressures and all the uncertainties that go with high school and college. And here's another one. This is called the 5th Law of Applied Terror. You're getting ready for a final exam, and it says, if you're given an open book exam, you will forget your book. Or the corollary, if you're given a take-home exam, you'll forget where you live. Again, these are typical feelings of nightmares that students have before exams. And here's the last one. Oftentimes you'll see a question that says, find X, or find the unknown. Well, this student actually saw the X on the exam, circled it, and said, here it is. So, but in the book, this particular book is focused on students from their ages 14 to 24. These are the formative years in your education and your development. It comes after your childhood, before adulthood, before aging, and so forth. And it's written for the students, for their parents, for their family, friends, and even for academics. The goal is to learn how to work smart, not hard, in your high school years, college years, and in your career. This is an example of textbook. This is the actual outside of the textbook sales building on my campus. And the entire facade in the front of the building is painted to represent bindings on various types of textbooks. So this is a very appropriate indicator of what this particular building is for. This is where you buy textbooks. Also, textbooks are very expensive. Today, the typical college student will spend from $1,200 to $1,500 a year on textbooks. And when they go to resell them, they will get maybe 20 or 25% of their value. So it's important to try to maximize what you learn from these textbooks and use it in your life and in your career. And that's one of the goals that I have for you today. A little bit about textbooks in general before we start the reading process. They're a guide to improve learning, classroom performance, and grades. They're typically picked by the instructor because they help facilitate what that professor would like you to know and learn in the class. My background is I've been on both sides of this. I've written textbooks and I've used textbooks. So I think I understand, both from a professor and a student, the importance of this process and how they can contribute to what you learn. Also in this book I have estimated reading times. It's helpful for the student to realize how long it will take to read a chapter in a book so that the student can schedule coursework and education and learning in their time frame. It's also important to understand the role of the textbook that this professor wants in the course, and we'll talk about that as well. How you will be graded and how the textbook will help contribute to that grade. And then finally, how to best read your textbook. So there's a number of objectives that I'd like to share with you. This is an example of reading times of textbooks. In this particular book, the college book, in the introductory materials in this book, has 12,700 words in it. How long will it take you to read that particular chapter? Well, the average person today reads 300 words a minute. The average college student reads 450 words a minute, and the fastest reader in the United States reads almost 6,000 words a minute. So in this introductory chapter, if we have 12,700 words and the average person reads 300 words, it will take you about 45 minutes to read the words in this chapter. The first chapter in the book, the introduction, has 12,000 words, and according to this graph, will take about 40 minutes. The whole book, all the words in this book, 100,000 words, should take the average reader about 6 hours to read. Now, this does not include graphics and visuals and charts, but only the text that's in the material. So, how do we read a textbook and read it smart? The student needs to understand the framework, the structure, and the content of the textbook and the course. You need to understand how the professor will use the textbook in the grading process. And the question is, will it be specific or will it be general? Will you have essay exams or will you have objective exams? Objective exams are true, false, multiple choice, fill-in, whereas essays are more conceptual and more thought. Depending on which framework the teacher used will impact the way you read your book. If you're uncertain about this, you ask the instructor. The very first day of class, say, Professor, how do you anticipate using the textbook in your grading and your assessment process? Make sure you understand. Make sure the entire class understands what framework the teacher will use. Read the course based on exam grading. Second, more important, you read a book for your own personal development and education in your future courses and in your future career. So there's a variety of purposes for the textbook. So let's talk about the reading sequence of the book. The first thing you do in a textbook is you read the preface. Historically, only about 20% of students will read the preface. 80% will skip it. And 80% will skip one of the most important parts of the book itself. The textbook explains the purpose and gives you a summary of the book. It's what the writer wants the student or the reader to know. Why would you skip that? That's a major mistake for the student and the reader. So spend the time reading the preface of the book. It tells you all about the author and his or her or their perspective. Most important. The second is to examine the table of contents. Look through everything that's in the book. Look at the chapter headings, look at the chapter major elements, and then look at the minor element. It's really literally the skeleton of the book. Everything else will hang on that skeleton. So before you read any part of the book except the preface, you review the table of contents. It's the roadmap to the book, and it's critical that you understand that. Third, you read the chapter learning objectives. Typically, but not always, authors will include in the very beginning of a chapter what he, she, or they want you to know. And they're called learning objectives. There are 8, 10, or 12 of those typically. And what they do is they're a list of expected accomplishments for the reader. That's what you need to know when you're done with a chapter. And typically every chapter in the very beginning will have a set of these objectives. So it gives you a pretty good perspective for what the chapter will contain and what its expectations are. Fourth, before you read the chapter, you read the chapter summary. This, from an author's perspective, this is probably one of the most difficult things to write. It normally contains about 7 to 10% of the content of the chapter. And because the author thinks everything in the chapter is important, it's hard to narrow that down to 1/10 of the total content. But it is essential, and again, it gives you an overall perspective before you even begin the chapter of what it contains and what you're expected to know. So it's a condensed version of the chapter, and I say for the author, it's probably one of the most difficult things for that person to do. But again, it gives you a summary and a perspective for the chapter. Notice that we haven't read one word yet of the chapter itself. We've looked at the front and we've looked at the back. Are we ready to read? No, we're not. We're still at the chapter, and what I would suggest you do next is peruse the chapter. Don't read the words, read the visuals. Look at the visuals, the graphs, the charts, the diagrams. Why are they there? What do they tell you? What's important? Literally page through the chapter and look at the pictures. Remember the concept, a picture is worth 1,000 words? This is so true when it comes to a textbook. So again, before you read anything in the chapter except the front and the back, look at the pictures. Look at what else is in there. Just slowly look through those, read the heading, read the whatever else is in there on the visual, but not the text. So this is the 5th step. The 6th and final step is now read the chapters. But not all words in the chapter are of equal value. Typically, read the first sentence in each paragraph. That's the lead-in, that's the most important part of that paragraph. Before you read the paragraph, stop and read the first sentence. Everything else in that paragraph will help complement or supplement or support what is in the first sentence. The first sentence is the key to the paragraph. All the first sentences in the paragraphs are the key to the chapter. When you've got a good understanding of the first sentence, then you can go ahead and read the rest of the paragraph and see how it expands or explains the first sentence. So you have, in summary then, we have 6 steps to follow in reading a textbook. First, read the preface. Read the preface. Be one of those 20 or 25%. And 75% will not have that benefit. Second, examine the table of contents. This is the roadmap to the entire textbook, and it will give you a perspective of what you're expected to know and you'll cover. Third, read the chapter learning objectives. Here's what you should garner or you should pick out of that particular chapter. Oftentimes these things are covered on exams, midterms, quizzes, etc. Fourth, read the chapter summary. Find out what the chapter is all about in a condensed format. Fifth, peruse the chapter. You have yet to read a word in the body, but look at the pictures and the graphs. What do they tell you? What's relevant? And then finally, after you've done the previous 5, you'll now read the body of the chapter and focus on the first sentence in each paragraph. It is the most relevant and the most important aspect of the text. Now you're reading smart. Not hard, but smart. So in summary, I'd like to thank you for watching this visual, this presentation, this tutorial, and I would ask that if you like this material and you think it would be helpful, check out this particular book on Amazon, on Kindle. Do a search called Confessions of a College Professor. You'll find the book, you'll see the table of contents, and it will help you in your high school, in your college, and in your career. So in closing, this is Dr. Bill saying thank you very much and best of everything in your education.